coming to you from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. This is The Gailey Show, also streaming right now on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/at The Gailey Show. I'm your host, JP Derbragosian. Executive producer Jim Pounds is here with me for Culture and Entertainment Fridays.
Hey, everyone. We made it through another week.
Did we?
No.
We did. We're here. On the show today, author Morgan Morgan joins me in the second half hour of the show to discuss his memoir, My Unleashing, a memoir of a queer dad. And we also have clips from the audio book where he sings, and he is a performer. So stay tuned for that. But up first, Jim and I have two film reviews for you. The films are The Writer and What We Wrote Together. As you can imagine from those titles, both of these films have writers for our main characters. So should we start with The Writer?
Sure. 2023.
So it is a 2023 co-production between Lithuania and Germany, but it's in English. The film released in the United States in 2024, and then Deku started streaming it in January of this year. It was directed by Romas Zabarauskas. This is a follow-up to his 2020 film, The Lawyer. But The Writer is about two former lovers. One is Russian, Kostas, and the other Lithuanian, Dima. Kostas and Dima fell in love while serving together in the Soviet army. Decades later, now living in the United States, Kostas publishes a book about their romance. So Dima comes to New York City to kind of clear up some key facts about their shared past. As they confront their different memories of their relationship, the loss of a friend, and their political past, their encounter turns mournful, wistful, angry, and ultimately endearing. The film stars Jamie Day and Bruce Ross. It's available through Deku, but you can also watch it through Amazon Prime. Off the top, as always, we tell you there is no depiction of animal violence. There is no depiction of violence, generally speaking. There is no gay bashing. There is no coming out storyline in this film, and it also does not have an HIV/AIDS storyline. No one dies at the end. We'll tell you if it has a happy ending at the end of our review. But Jim, what are your thoughts about The Writer?
Well, it's always nice to see, people of a certain age, men, women, or otherwise, in a film, because I think older folks don't get recognized as often. So here are people my age or something closer to that. So I liked seeing that. I loved how this was about something very specific. It was not sort of generalized point of view. It was a very specific story, an unusual story. It was very well written, I thought, very well performed. My one nit to pick was the fact that they would do these long tracking shots in a New York apartment, suggesting that it was as big as a bowling alley. And I remember thinking, is there an apartment that big in New York? But that's just maybe a small point. If you remember, they would track from the chairs over to the bar or to the kitchen. It seemed to take a long time.
I like that, but I'll tell you why in a minute.
So I liked the film. I thought it was, really original. It's like, well, I haven't seen something at all like that before, and I always appreciate it. Whether it has the greatest commercial appeal, I don't care. It's a story that held my attention, and I didn't know how it was going to turn out, so that you can't ask for a better story than that.
I thought it had an epic first line, which was,
Yes.
So, what language shall we speak? Excellent. So as you said, the film largely takes place in Kostas's apartment. And at first, because of that, I thought it was a play, because I was like, oh, this looks like a film adaptation of a stage show. And it's very dialogue heavy, which I love. I grew up in the theater. I like dialogue. So because of that, though, I'm sure you maybe think the same thing, Jim, that I'm sure some people would say, well, that makes it boring and nothing happens just because of that. But it is psychologically very interesting to me. I think first I want to highlight the performances. I thought Jamie Day and Bruce Ross were fantastic. I thought they turned in really nuanced performances. I felt they made the most out of every word, every gesture, and every glance. I mean, it was perfect. They didn't waste anything there. So I was looking them up on IMDb. I think we both looked them up on IMDb. I'm surprised that Ross and Day haven't done more films. Most of their work has been in short films, and I'm sure there's probably lots of reasons why that is. But they're very good in this, and I hope that it leads to more roles because I want to see more of their work. I also particularly liked how they weren't afraid of silence. I felt that they used
Yes.
that pretty effectively.
Very
You know,
effective.
also for a very dialogue heavy film, I thought they did a really good job with silence. I was surprised how the characters had lost all shreds of their accents. And I say this as a dual citizen and with a parent who emigrated to the United States. It's not been my experience that adults moving to another country will completely lose their accents and sound like they are from, North America.
Right.
It's a choice. They made it. Okay, here we are. It's a very political film. Would you agree?
Yes, very political.
And the characters do not shy away from talking about politics because how could you not? I mean, when we sort of map it out, so they both lived in the Soviet Union. They served in the army. That's where they met and had their relationship. Then Kostas moves to the US. Dima ends up being left behind, and then when the Soviet Union breaks up, he's in Lithuania. So they have three very different political and economic systems that they had to live through, which is 3 times as many as those of us in the United States. And so I think because of that, we saw a review that the reviewer was like, "This is a didactic film." And I'm like, well, what do you do when the characters are didactic? Does that mean we can never have any representation
Right.
of didactic rather characters? And they're trying to convince the other one that they're right. And sometimes though, I also felt that maybe they weren't talking to the other one and trying to convince the other one, but trying to convince themselves
Yep.
that they were right,
Yep.
and how they were talking about something.
Yep.
I thought the cinematography was very good. I thought there's some really interesting choices. And I want to talk about that scene that you were talking about, the tracking shot. So you've got Kostas and Dima talking to each other in Kostas's apartment. It's a New York apartment, right? So it is not big. It's the kitchen is one of those open air kitchens. You know what I mean? So it's got the countertop that opens up into the dining room, and the dining room spills over into the library, which all of that is what, 20 feet, 25 feet.
I assume.
Yeah.
New York apartment.
It's tiny. But the director Zarabauskas and cinematographer Narvidas Naujaslis. Wow.
Wow.
These Lithuanian names.
Why would you
I
try
so
that?
apologize. I should be better with Armenian last names. But they take the camera from Dima at one point, and they have this long tracking shot along the entire width of the apartment. So you start looking at Dima, and then eventually you're just looking at the apartment.
Yeah.
And you're seeing how Kostas has decorated it,
Yep.
how he's arranged it,
Yep.
what are his choices there before you finally arrive on Kostas. And I felt what that achieved was showing this big, huge gulf between them, that even though they were literally and together proximity wise, there was still this huge gulf between them. And I also really appreciated, another highlight for me of the cinematography was when they were cooking together in that very small New York City kitchen, and the camera and this really lovely golden lighting kind of capturing the intimacy of how they were moving. And it was really interesting to me how they were moving in sync. They weren't sort of doing that like bumpy rom-com, like, oh, running into each other. You know what I mean? And kind of playing it for laughs that way. It was just so interesting to me how quickly, even though they hadn't seen each other for so long, they were able, it was just so, they were in sync with each other as they moved around this very tiny kitchen. The film is slow for me in places. I thought there were some scenes of dialogue that I was like, yeah, I'm sure those characters would have talked about that, but I don't know if I need to see that.
Yep.
So I felt some stuff could have been cut by that. But I think that the film for me builds to the question that you're asking the entire time, which is, are these two going to get back together again? But I liked how the script also challenged you and had you challenge that question of like, because at some point I found myself thinking, does it make sense for them to get back together? Has it been too long? Are their politics too incompatible? And to their credit, again, Day and Ross do a very good job to contribute to that. So sometimes you can see the longing in their eyes as they're looking at each other, or hear that longing in how they're delivering a line. And then you're just like, get over yourselves. You're in love and you know it. Just get back together. But then they do a really good job with just like their tones of voice, or how they'll have just a little edge to it, or a glance, like a shot of like a looking down at the other one. And you're like, oh, maybe you guys should just keep meeting up like once a year or something. Like, keep the connection, but this might not be a good idea to get back together. So does it have a happy ending? Fast forward for the next 30 seconds if you don't want to hear this. I would characterize it in a word as yes. I felt that the ending was honest, and I think that it's a happy ending because of that.
it's hopeful, I think.
Yes.
That's what I took away from it.
Oh,
And in my personal life, I happen to actually know somebody who I won't identify who lived in Lithuania and was conscripted by the Russians and served in the Russian army. So I had a really kind of compelling personal reason to not know this guy's exact story, but to have a sympathy for there was another gay man in a similar situation and how difficult that is to have your culture subsumed underneath the occupying force. It was that part of it was really fascinating to me.
yeah. So out of 5 stars, what did you give it?
4.
4.
Yeah.
Okay. I, despite the pacing in some places, you're not going to find a film about 2 former Soviet soldiers who were in love and now reconnecting much later in life and trying to figure out not only the accuracy of their memories and challenge each other on that, but now wanting to have romance in their life from this person that was clearly I don't want to say the love of your life, because that kind of clearly they had a huge connection.
Yes.
And so for that reason, I'm giving it 5 out of 5
Wow.
stars.
Well, you're right. You'll never see a better version of this, probably.
We have just over a minute before the break, but let's start. I'll give you the description of our next film, and then Jim and I can get into it in the next break or the next segment. So the film is What We Wrote Together. It's a 2024 film. It's available on Deku and on Prime Video. It's written, directed by Nicola Tete. It stars Ezequiel Esteban Martinez, Santiago Margarinos, and Nazarina Rosas. The synopsis. Mariano and Juan are 2 men in their mid-30s. They've been dating for more than 6 years. They share a dog and a quiet, seemingly happy life together. I'm reading from the official description here. When an unexpected visit from a friend brings some surprising news, it threatens to upend their peaceful life they've built together, forcing them to question what each of them wants from life and whether their aspirations are truly aligned. Off the top, there is no depiction of animal violence. There is no depiction of violence, no gay bashing. There is no coming out storyline. And this film doesn't have an HIV/AIDS storyline either. And no one dies at the end.
Was this set in Brazil? I'm trying to remember now.
Argentina.
I'm sorry.
Argentinian film.
Okay.
If you want to find very excellent gay films, definitely check out the cinema of Argentina.
Yep.
Lots of really interesting work coming out of there for the past decade. We're going to take that break, though, right now. More about What We Wrote Together after this break. Don't forget to follow us on Blue Sky. We're at thegayleyshow.org. We do ticket giveaways for shows in Minneapolis, St. Paul, so follow us there. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Gailey Show. I'm your host, JP Debragosian. Executive producer Jim Pounds and I are reviewing films. It's Friday. We do culture and entertainment here. It is 21 minutes past the hour. We are talking about, well, before the break, we talked about the film The Writer, and now we're talking about the film What We Wrote Together. Jim, your thoughts?
I just want to say something to producers of gay films. If you put a ginger in the movie, I'm going to love it. You know what I mean? You don't have to have the best story. You don't have to have the greatest screenplay.
Wow.
If you put a ginger in, I'm in.
Is that offensive?
It is.
Ginger?
Well, it's sort of oversimplifying people, but I was riveted.
Okay.
So I'm saying something positive. It's
the casting.
It's a positive bias. Okay. Let's put it that way.
So, okay, beyond the objectification of one of the actors, what were your thoughts about the movie?
I thought, again, I love that these were, I've seen a lot of LGBT films about young people and young love and somebody just in college or something. So these are guys who've lived a little bit, they've been together for 6 years. So right away, you're starting in a different point on the timeline. And I really credit the filmmakers, because it would be so easy to keep doing the same formula over and over again. And this is not the formula. They have a dog and they have a life that already exists, and the conflict, such as it is, intersects that life, but we're not starting out at the beginning, the first time they ever
Mm,
looked at a
yeah.
man and or a guy and thought, oh, what are these feelings? It's not that. It's not just self-discovery.
Mhm.
It's dealing with a relationship and dealing with the challenges of that and the doubts and the insecurities and the questions and what is he thinking and what is he thinking. And I love that's richer to me.
Yeah.
Maybe because it hasn't been explored as much. Maybe after I've seen 10 films of gay men in their 30s, I'll feel the same way. But I haven't seen 10 films about gay men in their first 10 years of their relationship. As you know, John, my long-term relationship, I just had my 48th anniversary. So I love a longer perspective. I appreciate it, a longer perspective.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I liked this film, but I know that a lot of folks are going to ask, what is the central conflict? Because there isn't one.
Well,
Uh, the surprising news isn't surprising that the friend gives, and it doesn't actually threaten to upend Juan and Mariano's relationship. The whole thing is the relationship is very idyllic. Our two guys have rented or bought a house in the Argentinian countryside. They left the city because Mariano was having anxiety attacks in his graphic design job in the city. Juan is a writer whose book is doing very well. He's won an award. He's doing media interviews. He can work anywhere. They have this adorable dog. They have a pool. Mariano is starting a farm stand business and posting informational videos on Instagram. A lot of the shots of them are just reading together or making meals together or having really sensual, intimate moments together, very choice scenes. Like at no point in the movie did I think their relationship was actually threatened.
but what I really appreciated is, and this is not specifically to being gay at all, when people get into their 30s, I think there's a common sense of is this all there is? Is this what I was trying to make out of my life? There's a pre-middle age crisis where you question, is this the right relationship? Am I, you're not a kid anymore and you can see middle age coming. And so there is some doubt and there is some questioning, and does he really love me? So all of that has not been explored much by filmmakers. And you're right, it's not a major conflict. It's not a rock falling on the house. It's self-doubt. It's complacency. It's, oh, there he is again, like he has been for 6 years. And I love that. I love that is a really well observed observation.
Yeah, and I can see some people saying, well, that's not what a realistic relationship is like. Like, there's no fights, there's no arguments. I mean, at one point, one of them is checking out who's around on Grinder, but it's less about like he's having an affair and something like who is gay around us in the countryside.
Right.
So yeah, what I appreciated was that they weren't coming up with a conflict to sort of have a conflict.
Right.
It didn't feel like that. I get the argument that it doesn't feel after 6 years that they would be so into each other and da 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 da. Okay, fine. I could see the argument, but I haven't seen anything like this before, where it was just sort of a slice of life of these two men having a relationship together, starting a new version of their life together out in the countryside. Again, the surprising news from Juan's friend is that she's pregnant. That's pretty standard stuff. I mean, straight people are constantly getting pregnant, whether they should or not. So I didn't feel like that was, whoa, out of left field. Juan does disappear at some point, and he misses a media interview about his book. And it just comes out that he isn't too thrilled about living in the countryside.
Yeah.
Like, he's feeling a lot of guilt about how lucky he is, great relationship, cushy job, writing books. He doesn't have to do like BS work.
Right.
He's got a great house.
Right.
But he's like, this isn't something I would choose for myself at this moment in my life, but I love you and I want to be here for you.
And how many people in the audience can relate to making a big change in their lives, thinking, well, this'll do it.
Yeah.
And then you get there and it's like, well, for some reason, I'm not as happy as I think I should be. And some of that's coming to terms with the fact that life is a series of challenges. And so you probably don't have a lot of major peaks except in movies. You know what I mean? It's a lot of day to day and day after day. And I thought this captured that sort of doubt about whether this is as fulfilling as it's going to get or whether we've made this big change and I'm not sure that I like it. I went through that when I moved from California to Minneapolis. I ended up loving Minneapolis, thank goodness, because it could have very easily gone the other way, right, where I had doubts about it. So I thought it was really honestly observed, even if it's not melodrama, which is what often is given to us as entertainment.
I could have done with a couple of good relationship arguments. Even when I think what they may have said, well, we do have an argument here. I'm like, no, that's just sort of a pointed line,
Yeah, yeah.
and that sort of catches you, pulls you up short, and then you resolve it like a scene later. So that wasn't really like a full on like argument. So because of that, I am gonna give it 4 out of 5 stars. I thought the performances were very nice. I thought the cinematography was lovely. I mean, it was I was like, I want to go live in this house. But how about for you? What would you give it?
Every time I see an animal in a film, I think, oh no, this moron who directed it is going to put the animal in jeopardy, and that's going to
That's why
stimulate
we're
our
saying
emotions.
there's no animal
And there's no
violence.
animal. So here was the dog, and that was just fine. And the dog was never thrown off a cliff. And so I thought, I'm going to give it a 4.5 because they managed to avoid that trope of trying to hurt the animal or make us worry about the animal. They just let the animal be. And I appreciated that.
Yes, likewise. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 stars. So thank you. You can check out more of our movie reviews. We're going to start posting these on our website, so stay tuned for that. Go back to previous episodes on Fridays to get more movie reviews. We're going to fit in a break here. When we come back, my conversation with author Morgan Morgan about his upcoming memoir, My Unleashing, a memoir of a queer dad. Be sure to connect with our sponsors and advertisers who make this program possible and make progressive radio in Minnesota possible. When you visit them, say you heard about them on The Gailey Show.